And today we're going to be taking a look at another Gundam series, and this one happens to be Victory Gundam. Now, this is the fourth entry in the series, but the reason why I skipped the third one, which happens to be ZZ Gundam, is because it's mostly a continuation of the Zeta Gundam, and because I already talked about Zeta Gundam last year, I don't really want to start repeating myself a bunch of times, and of course, I just kind of want to move on and start talking about some of the other different series, so I figured I'd also talk about Victory Gundam. And weirdly enough, this is actually one of the few Gundam series that I actually never seen before. Not exactly sure why I skipped out on this one, but whatever, we're taking a look at it right here, right now. So the story begins in the year UC-0153. So there was a new army called the BESPA that had been taking out everything on Earth, since the Earth Federation has pretty much gone to shit. So there is a little resistance group called the Ligue Militaire, and that is where the main character Yuso Ewin is from. But one thing that is interesting to note that I want to mention real quick is that a lot of people usually like to say that Yuso is actually the great-grandson of Char Aznavour, since his lover from the movie Char's Counterattack actually has the same last name, and it takes place 60 years apart, so it is just a little interesting theory. But anyway, since the BESPA has been trying to take over the Earth, the Ligue Militaire is the only thing that can stop them. And it really doesn't take a genius to know what that secret weapon is, it just happens to be a mobile suit called the Victory Gundam, which is the only way they had to fight back. But of course, the BESPA seems to be growing larger and larger each day. So not only do they go around killing a bunch of people, but they also do a lot of cruel things like doing public executions to freak everybody out. So it is pretty typical Gundam stuff as to be expected, but the one thing that does make this show quite different is the tone of it, because this one is mostly pretty drop dead serious, and it also has a whole lot of depressing and feels moments. Now yes, all the other series within this franchise all have that kind of stuff, but I found this one has taken into a whole new level, because there's a whole slew of deaths that happen within this show. And a part of the reason why this one has such a more darker tone than most of the other series is that the creator of the show was actually going through a pretty hard time when making this one. So it's pretty interesting to see a Gundam series that is actually really dark. However, I do feel that some of the characters in this show could have been much better. But as for the main character, Yuso, I think he's actually a really good character. I just wish we got to know a little bit more about the side characters and such. But of course, the character Kajina is also really good as well. But to get back to what I said about the side characters is that, yeah, this is not going to be much of a spoiler here, but yeah, there's a lot of characters that die within this show, and because of that, you don't really get to know much time about some of these characters, and sometimes it'll be like, oh, my name is Mr. So-and-so, and I do this thing, and then pfft, dead. Okay, they're not exactly like that, I just wanted to be stupid about it, but either way though, there's just a few death scenes that I wish that could have been done better, since there are some death scenes that do happen within this one that are actually done really well, and I kinda wish they had more of that. But for the most part, this one is just not a happy time. So now, let's start moving on to the other things, like the animation. So the animation in this one is very simplistic, but is at least pretty good. But I'd say it's more safe than anything, considering I don't think it's as good looking as like Zeta Gundam was, but this one is still fairly nice looking, and of course the tone of it works with it really well. But as for the designs, I think this is the part where things could have been done way better. Because I do find that a lot of the character designs are really nothing too special. I mean, the only one that's really memorable would be the main character Yuso and the rival character Kajina. Same thing goes for the mech designs as well. I think a lot of them just could have been done a bit better. Like the Victory Gundam itself just looks kind of okay. So overall, I'd say that the animation itself is pretty good for what it is, but just some of the designs just could have been done a little bit better. Now, as for the show's music, the music in this one is actually pretty awesome. All the music sounds really good and also suits the tone really well, so you know that a lot of the music in this one is going to be sounding pretty dark, and of course some of it sounds really good with the depressing parts. So I really can't make any complaints about that whatsoever. Also, the two openings and the ending themes are also really great. And now, as for the show's voice acting, unfortunately, I can't really say much here because this one was only released in Japan. So because of this, I really can't say the quality of it. It is kind of unfortunate that this one never got a dub just for more options and such. Also, if I remember off the top of my head, I think this might be one of the few ones that was only in Japan. Well, either way, I can't say much about it, but for the most part, as far as I can tell, it sounds fine the way it is. So now, as for the score, if I were to rate this one, I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. Now, before I really get into it here, I just want to do a little bit of a recap and say that the two other series I've taken a look at, like the original and Zeta, I gave both of those 9s, and this one going down to a 7. I know you're probably thinking that this one's like, oh my god, it's so bad. Well, as you know me, I'm not one of those people that say, oh, if this show is just a little bit not as good as the other one, then that means it's completely trash, which is obviously not true, because I actually do find this one is actually pretty good. I think it has a lot of really good moments within this show. Now, yeah, like I said earlier about the whole death scene thing, a lot of that stuff could have been done a little bit better, but for the most part, when it comes to everything else, I do find that it is actually pretty good, especially with like the main character Yuso and then the other character Kajina. And then for the death scenes that were actually done really well, or at least very memorable and very touching. And I found the dark tone was actually a pretty interesting approach, which I am always welcoming. But I do find some of the designs could have been done better, and one other thing I should mention is that I do find that the middle of the show kinda dragged on a little bit too longer than I would like to, but of course it wasn't anything too excruciating. So you're probably thinking that I feel really mixed about it, but I'd say it's more good than bad, considering I do really like what they did with some of the main characters. Yeah, some of the side characters could have been done way better. The fight scenes are still really good, the overall animation flow is still good, and of course the music in it is just really awesome. And as I said before, it does have a lot of memorable scenes that are just really well done. So I really do think that Victory Gundam is fairly underrated within the Gundams franchise. But with that said, there are some flaws like I already mentioned, but I still think this one is at least worth a watch, mostly for the character developments of the main characters. And according to a lot of Gundam fans, a lot of people say that this one is actually one of the worst Gundam series, and personally, I have to disagree with that. I definitely don't think this one is the worst. Now, is it as amazing as the other two that I looked at? No, definitely not as good as that, but I still think it does have some really good moments that hold up on its own. But that is why I do consider it to be underrated, but of course I can understand some people not liking this one as much, but overall for me is that it is good and I did like it quite a bit, but I don't consider it to be an all-time favorite of mine, but it does have some very memorable parts that will always stick with me, and I think that's at least good enough for me. So that's all I have to say about Victory Gundam. It did take me quite a bit by surprise. But as you know with the anime feature is that I'm actually going to be taking a look at another Gundam series for next year, and the one I'm going to be doing for next year is actually going to be G Gundam, so fuck yeah.